My secret daughter mistakenly called my mother-in-law after I collapsed. Then she told her son, who was my millionaire ex-husband for 5 years. What he did next shocked the entire neighborhood. Grandma Georgina, something's wrong with my mommy. The voice on the other end of the phone was small, trembling, terrified. A child's voice that didn't belong to anyone Georgina Calloway knew. I'm sorry, dear. I think you have the wrong number. I'm not a grandmother. Yes, you are. You're my Grandma Georgina. My mommy told me to call you if there was ever an emergency and mommy won't wake up. She's on the floor and there's so much blood and I don't know what to do and I'm really, really scared. What's your name, sweetheart? Aria Monroe. My mommy is Cassidy. You used to be her mother-in-law before she and my daddy got divorced. But daddy doesn't know about me because mommy said it was complicated. Have you ever gotten a phone call that changed your entire life in the span of 30 seconds? Have you ever realized in one devastating moment everything you thought you knew was a lie? Georgina Calloway, 72 years old, society matriarch, keeper of family reputation, felt her perfectly ordered world shatter like crystal hitting marble. Because the name Cassidy Monroe was one she hadn't heard in 5 years. The woman her son Fletcher had divorced. The woman Georgina had convinced him was unsuitable, too common, not good enough for the Calloway legacy. And now that woman's daughter, a granddaughter Georgina never knew existed, was calling her because her mother was bleeding on a kitchen floor. Stay with me on this journey, because what happens next isn't just about a collapsed mother or a secret child or a millionaire ex-husband. This is about the moment when all our carefully constructed lies come crashing down. This is about a 7-year-old girl who made one phone call that would expose a 5-year secret and force 3 people to face the choices that destroyed them. If you've ever kept a secret so big it consumed you, hit that like button right now. If you've ever wondered whether people can truly change or if past mistakes define us forever, you need to hear this story all the way through. I'm Dr. Phillips, and tonight I'm sharing a story about redemption, second chances, and a renovation that went viral for all the right reasons. But before we get to the shocking part that had an entire neighborhood gathering in the streets, we need to go back to the moment when everything fell apart. Back to the day Cassidy Monroe's body finally gave out. The kitchen floor was surprisingly clean from this angle. That was Cassidy's first coherent thought as the world tilted sideways and her legs buckled beneath her. She'd mopped yesterday, humming along to old Fleetwood Mac songs, while Aria sat at the table doing homework, her dark curls falling across her face in that way that always made Cassidy's heart ache. Because those curls, that stubborn set of her jaw, those storm-gray eyes, they all belonged to someone else, someone who didn't even know Aria existed. The edges of her vision pulled inward, darkening like a tunnel closing. Somewhere far away, she heard a voice. Small, high, frightened in a way she'd never heard before. Mommy? Mommy, wake up. Cassidy wanted to respond, wanted to tell her daughter that she was fine, that Cassidy Monroe didn't collapse in her kitchen on a random Tuesday evening. She was a registered nurse, for God's sake. She knew the warning signs. Except she'd ignored every single one of them, hadn't she? The bone-deep fatigue she'd blamed on double shifts at Mercy General. The dizziness she'd attributed to skipping lunch and dinner and sometimes breakfast too. The chest pain she'd convinced herself was just stress, just the weight of raising a child alone, just the price of building a life from nothing. Just like she'd ignored all the warning signs 5 years ago when her marriage was dying and she was too heartbroken to save it. Mommy, please. Please wake up. Aria's face swam into focus. 7 years old, with her father's eyes staring down at her mother in absolute terror. My beautiful girl, Cassidy thought. My brilliant, brave, beautiful girl who doesn't know that her existence is a secret from half the people who should love her. Phone, Cassidy managed to whisper. The word felt like it was coming from underwater. Call 911, baby. But Aria, 7 years old and panicking, didn't call 911. She called the only other number her mother had made her memorize for emergencies. The number Cassidy had kept in her phone for years, never quite able to delete it, even though she'd told herself 1,000 times she should. She called her grandmother, the grandmother who had no idea she existed. The grandmother who had spent 5 years believing her son's first marriage had ended cleanly, completely, without consequences. Georgina Calloway had been hosting her monthly garden club meeting when her cell phone rang. She normally would have ignored an unknown number. Solicitors were so persistent these days. But something, some instinct she couldn't name, made her excuse herself from the sitting room and answer. "Hello? Grandma Georgina?" Georgina had frozen, her teacup halfway to her lips. The voice was young, female, absolutely terrified. "I'm sorry, dear. I think you have the wrong number. I'm not a grandmother." "Yes, you are. You're my grandma Georgina. My mommy told me to call you if there was ever an emergency and mommy won't wake up. She's on the floor and I don't know what to do." Georgina's heart had begun to race in a way her cardiologist would definitely not approve of. "Sweetheart, slow down. What's your name?" "Aria. Aria Monroe. My mommy is Cassidy." The name hit Georgina like a physical blow. Cassidy Monroe. Her former daughter-in-law. The sweet nursing student Fletcher had married against Georgina's wishes. The girl from nowhere with no connections, no family money, no social standing. The girl Georgina had spent 3 years subtly undermining, until Fletcher finally came to his senses and married someone suitable. "You used to be her mother-in-law," Aria continued, her words tumbling out in a rush, "before she and my daddy got divorced. But daddy doesn't know about me because mommy said it was complicated. But you're in her. Phone is emergency contact and I'm really scared and there's blood and she won't wake up." The garden club ladies had watched in fascination as all color drained from Georgina Calloway's face. "Where are you, Aria? What's your address?" The child rattled off an address in Fairview, a neighborhood Georgina vaguely knew as middle class but respectable. Nothing like the circle she and Fletcher moved in. Nothing like the Westchester estate Fletcher had shared with his second wife, Paige. "I'm calling 911 for your mother right now, sweetheart. Stay on the line with me. Can you do that?" "Yes, Grandma." The casual use of the title nearly broke Georgina's composure entirely. She'd never been a grandmother. Fletcher's 3 children with Paige called her Georgina, formal and distant, the way Paige preferred. But this child, this secret granddaughter, said it with such natural affection that Georgina felt something crack in her carefully constructed armor. She made the 911 call with shaking hands while keeping Aria on the line talking to her in soothing tones about staying calm, about being brave, about how help was coming. "You're doing so well, darling. Your mother would be so proud of you. Is mommy going to die?" The question, asked in such a small voice, nearly destroyed Georgina. "No, sweetheart. The ambulance is almost there. I can hear the sirens. Can you hear them?" "Yes." "Good. When they arrive, you let them in and you tell them everything you told me. Can you do that?" "Yes, Grandma." After ensuring the paramedics had arrived and a neighbor had come to sit with Aria, Georgina had excused herself from her garden club meeting. Her friends had never seen her so rattled. Georgina Calloway didn't rattle. Georgina Calloway was composed, controlled, the iron-spined matriarch of one of the city's most prominent families. But Georgina Calloway had just discovered she had a granddaughter, a 7-year-old granddaughter, which meant, if the math was right, if the timeline added up the way she suspected it did, Cassidy had been pregnant when Fletcher divorced her, or had gotten pregnant shortly after. Either way, Fletcher had a daughter he knew nothing about, and Georgina had a terrible suspicion she knew exactly why Cassidy had never told him. She drove to her downtown office, the one she still maintained, even though she had officially retired from the family real estate business 5 years ago. She had access to records there, files, information. It took her exactly 45 minutes to confirm what she'd suspected. Fletcher had never received a single call, text, or email from Cassidy Monroe after their divorce was finalized 5 years ago. Nothing. Radio silence. Complete cutoff, which meant either Cassidy had never tried to tell him about their daughter, or she'd made a conscious choice not to. Georgina knew her son, knew his ambition, his calculated approach to relationships, his ability to compartmentalize anything that didn't serve his goals. She'd raised him that way, hadn't she? Had taught him that legacy mattered more than love, that social position was worth more than personal connection. She'd created a man who could divorce a woman for not being suitable, enough for not fitting the image of what a Calloway wife should be. And now a child was paying the price for their collective cruelty. At 72 years old, Georgina Calloway made what might have been the most important decision of her life. She called her son. "Mother, I'm in a meeting." Fletcher's voice was clipped, impatient. Always in a meeting, always too busy for anything that didn't directly contribute to building his empire. "Fletcher James Calloway, you need to sit down." Something in her tone made him pause. "What's wrong?" "I just received a phone call from a 7-year-old girl named Aria. She called me because her mother collapsed and she didn't know who else to contact. Her mother is Cassidy Monroe, your ex-wife. Georgina could hear Fletcher's sharp intake of breath across the line. Is Cassidy all right? What happened? She collapsed in her kitchen. The paramedics have taken her to Mercy General Hospital. But that's not why I'm calling, Fletcher. The child, Aria. She's your daughter. The silence on the other end was so complete that Georgina checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. That's impossible. Cassidy and I never had children. That was the whole problem. We couldn't conceive and I needed an heir, and we talked about this, Mother. We discussed it extensively before I married Paige. She's 7 years old, Fletcher. Do the math. More silence. Then, quietly, carefully, like he was defusing a bomb. Are you certain? I just spent 45 minutes confirming that Cassidy never contacted you after the divorce. Not once. Which means either she discovered the pregnancy after you'd already moved on, or she made the choice not to tell you. Either way, you have a daughter who's been alive for 7 years while you've been building your empire and playing happy families with Paige. Why wouldn't she tell me? Georgina closed her eyes, feeling the full weight of her own culpability pressing down on her shoulders. That's an excellent question, Fletcher. One I suggest you ask her yourself. The child gave me an address in Fairview. Cassidy was taken to Mercy General. I'm heading there now. Mother, I can't just drop everything. I have responsibilities. The Singapore deal is closing tomorrow, and the board is waiting for my presentation. You have a daughter who just watched her mother collapse. A daughter who's been alive for 7 years while you've been too busy building real estate portfolios to notice. I don't care about your responsibilities, Fletcher. For once in your carefully planned life, do the right thing. She hung up before he could respond. Then Georgina Calloway, who hadn't set foot in a public hospital in decades, drove to Mercy General to meet the granddaughter she never knew she had. The cardiac waiting room at Mercy General was nothing like the private medical facilities Georgina usually frequented. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Plastic chairs lined the walls. A television in the corner played news no one was watching. It smelled like antiseptic and bad coffee and human worry. Aria sat in one of those plastic chairs, her legs too short to reach the floor, swinging nervously. She was small for 7, with a wild mane of dark curls that clearly hadn't seen a brush today. She wore jeans with grass stains on the knees and a t-shirt with a constellation map on it. In her lap, she clutched a small stuffed elephant that had seen better days. But it was her eyes that stopped Georgina in her tracks. Gray eyes, the exact shade of Fletcher's. The exact shade of Georgina's late husband, James. Calloway eyes, unmistakable and undeniable. Aria? The little girl looked up, and Georgina saw tear tracks on her cheeks. Grandma Georgina? Yes, sweetheart. It's me. Aria launched herself out of the chair and wrapped her arms around Georgina's waist, holding on like she was drowning, and Georgina was the only solid thing in a tilting world. They won't tell me anything about Mommy. They said I'm too young and I need an adult, and the neighbor lady had to go pick up her grandson, and I don't know if Mommy's okay. Georgina, who had spent 7 decades perfecting the art of emotional control, felt tears prick her eyes. She knelt down, ignoring the protest in her knees, and took Aria's small face in her hands. Listen to me, darling. I'm here now. I'm going to find out exactly how your mother is doing, and I'm not going anywhere until we know she's all right. Do you understand? You promise? I promise. Georgina approached the nurse's station with the authority of someone accustomed to getting answers. The charge nurse looked up, ready with the standard speech about patient privacy and authorized family members only. I'm Georgina Calloway. That child over there is my granddaughter, and she called me because her mother, Cassidy Monroe, was brought in by ambulance approximately 2 hours ago. I need to know her condition immediately. Something about Georgina's tone, or perhaps the set of her shoulders, or maybe just the sheer force of 72 years of expecting compliance, made the nurse pull up the records. Miss Monroe is stable. She's being treated for severe dehydration, malnutrition, and exhaustion. The attending physician also suspects anemia. She's conscious now and asking about her daughter. I need to see her. Are you listed as emergency contact? I am now. 30 minutes later, after calling in a favor from a hospital board member she played bridge with, Georgina was escorted to Cassidy's room. Aria held her hand the entire way, trusting this grandmother she'd just met with a faith that broke Georgina's heart. Cassidy Monroe looked smaller than Georgina remembered. At 29 years old, she should have been in her prime. Instead, She looked exhausted, hollowed out, like she'd been running, on fumes for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to be full. But when Arya burst through the door, Cassidy's entire face transformed. Baby. Oh baby, come here. Arya climbed carefully onto the hospital bed, mindful of the 4 lines, and buried her face in her mother's neck. I was so scared, Mommy. You wouldn't wake up and there was blood and I couldn't remember if it was 911 or 991, so I called Grandma Georgina like you said. Cassidy's eyes, still the warm brown Georgina remembered, met hers over Arya's head. The expression in them was complex. Fear, certainly. Defiance. Exhaustion. But also something else. A kind of weary resignation, like she'd always known this moment would come eventually. You did exactly right, sweetheart, Cassidy said softly, stroking Arya's curls. You were so brave. I'm so proud of you. Grandma bought me hot chocolate, and she promised she wouldn't leave until we knew you were okay. And she talked to the nurses in her scary voice, and they let us come see you. Despite everything, Cassidy's lips twitched. Her scary voice? It's very effective, Georgina said dryly. Cassidy, we need to talk. I know. Arya, darling, Georgina said gently, why don't you go to the waiting room and draw me a picture? There's a vending machine down the hall. Here's some money for a snack. Can I get Cheetos? Mommy never lets me have Cheetos because she says they're not nutritious. Today you can have all the Cheetos you want. After Arya left, clutching dollar bills and thrilled at this unprecedented freedom, silence fell between the 2 women. Cassidy spoke first. You called him. It wasn't a question. Of course not. If Georgina knew, Fletcher would know within the hour. That was how the Calloway family operated. Information was currency, and secrets were weaknesses to be exploited. I called him, Georgina confirmed. He's on his way here. Cassidy, why didn't you tell him? You know why. Pretend I don't. Cassidy laughed, a bitter sound that had no humor in it. Because your son made it very clear that I was defective goods, that my inability to provide an heir made me worthless as a wife, that I was unsuitable, too common, not good enough for the Calloway legacy. She paused. Those were your words, weren't they, Georgina? At the engagement party, you told Fletcher I was a mistake he'd regret. Georgina had the grace to flinch. I did say that. I was wrong. Were you? Because Fletcher agreed with you. He divorced me to marry Paige Sutton, who came from the right family and had the right connections and could give him what I apparently couldn't. Cassidy's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. And then, 2 months after our divorce was finalized, I found out I was pregnant. With his child. The child he'd spent 3 years telling me he desperately wanted. So you kept it from him. I saw the announcement in the Times. Fletcher Calloway and Paige Sutton expecting their first child, due in the spring. Cassidy looked directly at Georgina. He got her pregnant while we were still married. While I was working overtime to save money for fertility treatments, while he was telling me we'd figure it out together. So yes, I kept it from him. Because he'd already started a new family, and I had more pride than to beg for scraps of his attention. He had a right to know. He lost that right when he called me barren and threw me away like garbage. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and true and impossible to deny. Georgina sat down heavily in the visitor's chair. I'm not here to defend what Fletcher did to you. I'm not even here to defend my own role in destroying your marriage. I'm here because that beautiful child in the waiting room is my granddaughter, and she deserves better than the mistakes her family has made. What do you want from me, Georgina? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You've raised that child alone for 7 years. You've clearly sacrificed everything to give her a good life. You owe the Calloway family nothing. Georgina paused. But Fletcher will be here within the hour, and he will want answers. I'm giving you time to prepare for that conversation. There's nothing to prepare. He's not taking her from me. No one's taking her from you. But Cassidy, whether you like it or not, Fletcher is her father. And he has rights. He has no rights where Arya is concerned. I've been her mother, her father, her entire world for 7 years. He doesn't get to walk in here and demand anything. Then what happens when Arya asks about him? Because she will. She already asked me if her daddy is coming. Cassidy's face crumpled. What did you tell her? I told her yes, because I called him, and he is coming. And whatever you think of Fletcher, whatever he did to you, that child deserves to know her father. Before Cassidy could respond, the door opened. Dr. Yolanda Reeves, Cassidy's colleague and closest friend, entered with a tablet and a concerned expression. "Cass, you're supposed to be resting, not entertaining visitors." She glanced at Georgina with the professional coolness of someone protecting her patient. "I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Miss Monroe needs—" "It's okay, Yolanda." Cassidy's voice was tired. "This is Georgina Calloway, my former mother-in-law, and apparently Arya's new favorite person." Yolanda's eyes widened. "The mother-in-law? The one who—" "The same." Yolanda's expression went from professional to icy. "Then I'm definitely asking you to leave. My patient doesn't need stress right now. Actually, I need to know my diagnosis." Cassidy struggled to sit up straighter. "Don't sugarcoat it, Yolanda. How bad is it?" Yolanda sighed, glancing between Cassidy and Georgina. "Severe anemia, dehydration, and exhaustion. When's the last time you ate a proper meal or slept more than 4 hours? I've been picking up extra shifts. You've been running yourself into the ground. Cass, you collapsed from malnutrition and stress. If Arya hadn't called for help when she did, you could have had a seizure or worse." Yolanda pulled up a chair. "You're a nurse. You know what this means. You can't keep living like this. I don't have a choice. Everyone has choices. Not when you're raising a child alone. Not when you're trying to build a life from nothing. Not when every decision you make is about survival." Cassidy's voice rose slightly. "I've done everything right, Yolanda. I went to school. I got my degree. I worked my way up to charge nurse. I found a decent neighborhood with good schools. I've given Arya everything she needs, except a mother who's healthy enough to raise her." The words, delivered with the blunt honesty of true friendship, hit Cassidy like a slap. "That's not fair. It's completely fair. You're killing yourself. And for what? Pride? Because you won't ask for help? Because you won't tell your daughter's father that he has a child? He doesn't deserve to know." "Maybe not," Yolanda said quietly. "But Arya deserves to have 2 parents if that's possible. And you deserve to not carry this burden alone." Before Cassidy could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices, someone demanding information, a nurse trying to enforce protocol. And then Fletcher Calloway walked through the door. 5 years had changed him. That was Cassidy's first thought. The boy she'd married at 24, full of dreams and ambition and promises he'd eventually break, was gone. In his place stood a man who looked every inch the millionaire CEO the newspapers called him. He was taller than she remembered, or maybe he just carried himself with more authority now. His dark hair was threaded with silver at the temples. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. But it was his eyes that caught her. Those gray eyes, the same shade as Arya's, were wide with something that looked like shock, or maybe fear. Cassidy. Just her name, spoken in that voice she'd loved and hated and tried so hard to forget. Fletcher. He moved closer to her bed, his hands shoved in his pockets like he didn't know what to do with them. "The doctors say you're going to be fine. I work here. They would have told me if I wasn't." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Still sharp as ever. "Why are you here, Fletcher?" "Because apparently I have a daughter." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "A 7-year-old daughter who just called my mother in a panic because you collapsed. A daughter I knew nothing about. And whose fault is that?" His eyes flashed with something. Anger, maybe. Or hurt. "Yours, Cassidy. You kept her from me. You had my child and never said a word. I found out I was pregnant 2 months after our divorce. 2 months after you threw away our marriage for Paige Sutton. Do you remember what you told me, Fletcher? That you and Paige made sense together. That I could never understand your world. That doesn't give you the right." "I saw the announcement in the Times," Cassidy continued, her voice shaking now. "You and Paige were expecting a baby due in the spring, which meant you got her pregnant while we were still married. Why, I was working overtime to save money for our fertility treatments." Fletcher went pale. "Cassidy, you had already started a new family. What was I supposed to do? Call you up and say, hey, remember how you said I could never give you children? Surprise. But I'm sure your pregnant fiancé would love to hear about it. I had a right to know. You lost that right when you cheated on me." Cassidy's voice rose, and somewhere a monitor beeped urgently. "You lost that right when you chose her over me, over us, over everything we built together." "You're right." Fletcher dragged a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it hurt. "You're absolutely right. I was a bastard to you, Cassidy. I threw away the best thing in my life because I was too stupid and too ambitious to see what actually mattered. Cassidy wasn't prepared for his honesty. Fletcher, but she's my daughter too, and I have missed 7 years of her life. First words, first steps, first day of school. His voice broke. You took all of that from me. You took yourself from her when you destroyed our marriage. They stared at each other, years of hurt and anger and regret filling the space between them. Georgina stood quietly in the corner, watching her son face the consequences of his choices. Yolanda moved protectively closer to Cassidy's bed. Finally, Fletcher spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What's she like? The question broke something in Cassidy, because beneath the anger, beneath the betrayal, she could see what this was costing him. The knowledge that somewhere in this hospital was a piece of himself he'd never known existed. She's brilliant, Cassidy said softly. Reads at a 5th grade level already. Asks questions about everything. Science, art, why people make the choices they do. She paused. She's stubborn as hell, won't back down from anything she believes is right. She gets that from both of us. Does she look like me? She has your eyes, your smile, your ability to charm everyone she meets. Cassidy's voice softened further. But she has my heart. I made sure of that. Fletcher's eyes were suspiciously bright. Can I meet her? Please, Cassidy. I know I have no right to ask for anything from you, but I'm asking anyway. Let me meet her. She wants to meet you too. He looked stunned. She does. She's 7, Fletcher. All she knows is that she's different from the other kids because she doesn't have a daddy. I never told her why. I never told her you were the one who left, or that you didn't know about her. I just said it was complicated. Why? Because she deserved to make up her own mind about you, not inherit my anger. Cassidy met his eyes. But hear me clearly. If you walk out there and meet her, you're making a commitment. You don't get to do this once out of curiosity and then disappear back to your perfect life in Westchester. Either you're in, really in, or you walk away right now. I'm in. No hesitation. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do. I want to be her father. You have 3 other children with Paige, a wife, a life. Something flickered across Fletcher's face. Actually, I don't. What? Paige and I divorced 2 years ago. He said it quietly, without emotion. She got the Westchester house and primary custody of the kids. I get them on weekends. Cassidy stared at him. What happened? What happened? Fletcher laughed bitterly. I built my empire, just like I wanted. Callaway Development is worth $200 million now. I have properties in 6 states. I've achieved everything I thought mattered. He looked at her. And I'm miserable, Cassidy. Paige and I, we made sense on paper, just like I told you. But there was nothing real there. No connection, no partnership. We were 2 people who looked good together at charity galas and made strategic decisions about our children's futures. Fletcher, you asked why I'm here. It's not just because of Aria, though God knows that's enough. I'm here because seeing you again, even like this, is the first time I've felt anything real in 5 years. He stepped closer to her bed. I made the biggest mistake of my life when I let you go. I threw away something genuine for something shiny, and I've regretted it every single day since. Cassidy's heart was hammering. You can't just walk back into my life after 5 years and... I know I can't undo the past. But maybe I can be part of your future, part of Aria's future. His voice dropped. I'm not asking you to forgive me or take me back. I'm just asking for a chance to be the father she deserves. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, to prove to you that I'm not the man who broke your heart. Not anymore. Before Cassidy could respond, Yolanda knocked on the doorframe, even though she was already in the room. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation in the waiting room. What kind of situation? The kind where a very elegant elderly woman, Yolanda glanced at Georgina, no offense, none taken, is having a very loud argument with a very angry blonde woman about who has the right to take a certain 7-year-old home. Fletcher went white. Paige is here? Unless you have another blonde woman in your life who refers to herself as Fletcher Calloway's partner in all things. Cassidy sat up despite the 4 tugging at her arm. She can't take Aria. She has no rights. Nobody's taking anybody anywhere, Fletcher said firmly. Paige has no claim to Aria. None. Then what is she doing here? Probably causing trouble. It's what she does best. He looked at Cassidy. Stay here. Rest. I'll handle this. Fletcher, trust me, Cassidy. Please. And somehow, despite everything, against all logic and self-preservation, Cassidy found herself nodding. Trust. Such a small word for such an enormous risk. If you're wondering whether Cassidy was making a mistake, whether Fletcher really had changed, or if he was just saying what she wanted to hear, leave a comment below. Because what happened next in that waiting room would give everyone their answer. Fletcher walked out of Cassidy's hospital room with his mother following close behind. Yolanda stayed with Cassidy, holding her hand as the sound of raised voices grew louder down the hallway. The cardiac waiting room had never seen drama quite like this. When Fletcher and Georgina arrived, they found a scene that would have been comical if it wasn't so painful. On one side stood Paige Sutton Calloway, 41, and beautiful in that high maintenance way of wealthy women who had unlimited time and money to invest in their appearance. She wore a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her blonde hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked like she'd stepped out of a country club luncheon, which she probably had. Beside her stood 2 hospital security guards who looked deeply uncomfortable with whatever was happening. On the other side of the waiting room sat Arya, her legs still too short to reach the floor. Orange Cheeto dust on her fingers, watching the adults argue with wide, frightened eyes. And between them, trying to mediate, was a young nurse who looked about 5 seconds away from calling for backup. Fletcher entered the waiting room and the chaos immediately stopped. Everyone turned to look at him. But Fletcher only had eyes for one person, the little girl with dark curls and gray eyes who was looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and fear. His daughter. His child. 7 years of missed moments sitting in a plastic chair clutching a stuffed elephant. Fletcher. Paige's voice cut through his thoughts like a knife. Finally, I've been trying to get answers from these people for 20 minutes. What is going on? Why did your mother call me and tell me you have a secret child with your ex-wife? The entire waiting room was watching now. Other patients' families, off-duty nurses, even the security guards. This was better than any reality show. Paige, this isn't the time or place. Oh, I disagree. I think this is the perfect time and place. Paige's voice rose. Did you know about her? Have you been playing happy families behind my back while claiming you needed space from our children? I found out about Arya 3 hours ago, the same time my mother did. Arya. Paige said the name like it tasted bad. How convenient. How old is she? 7. You could have heard a pin drop in that waiting room. 7, Paige repeated slowly. Which means this woman, this nurse, got pregnant right after your divorce. How do you even know she's yours? Georgina stepped forward, and everyone in the room instinctively backed up. When Georgina Calloway spoke, people listened. Because she has Fletcher's eyes, his smile, and his stubborn chin. Because she's brilliant and charming and unmistakably a Calloway. Georgina's voice could have cut glass. And because, unlike some people, Cassidy Monroe has never lied about paternity to trap a wealthy man. The waiting room gasped collectively. This was getting better by the second. Someone in the back actually pulled out their phone to record. Paige turned crimson. How dare you? How dare I state facts? You got pregnant to force Fletcher into marriage. You've spent the past 7 years using our grandchildren as bargaining chips for your lifestyle. Georgina's eyes flashed. Don't you dare stand in my hospital and judge a woman who's been raising her child, alone because she had more pride than to chase after a man who didn't deserve her. Fletcher stared at his mother in shock. Mother. Oh, don't look so surprised, Fletcher. I'm 72, not blind. I know exactly what kind of marriage you had with Paige, just like I knew exactly what kind of marriage you threw away with Cassidy. Georgina's eyes softened as she looked at Arya. But this isn't about you or Paige or your mistakes. This is about this beautiful child who's been terrified for her mother. Arya, who had been sitting quietly through all of this, suddenly stood up. The adults were so busy arguing they didn't notice at first. But then she walked right up to Fletcher, looked up at him with those gray eyes, those Calloway eyes, and asked the question that would change everything. Are you my daddy? Every person in that waiting room held their breath. The security guard stopped shifting. The nurse stopped trying to mediate. Even Paige went silent. Fletcher knelt down so he was eye level with his daughter. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable and devastating. She had his eyes, his bone structure, the same stubborn set to her jaw that he saw in the mirror every morning. Yes, sweetheart, he said quietly. I'm your daddy. Mommy said you lived far away. I did, but I'm here now. Are you going to stay? It was the question everyone in the room wanted answered. Fletcher glanced at Paige, at his mother, at the gathered crowd of strangers who were witnessing the most important moment of his life. He looked back at his daughter and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, I'm going to stay." Arya studied him with those serious gray eyes, old beyond her years. "Okay, but you have to be nice to Mommy. She works very hard and she gets tired, and sometimes she cries at night when she thinks I'm asleep." Several nurses in the waiting room started openly crying. "I promise I'll be nice to your Mommy," Fletcher said, his voice rough with emotion. "And you can't leave again." Arya's voice was firm. "Mommy says people who leave once will always leave, but I think maybe if you promise really hard, you could stay forever." "I promise really hard, Arya. I'm not going anywhere." "Okay." And just like that, with the casual acceptance of childhood, Arya stepped forward and hugged her father for the first time. Fletcher wrapped his arms around his daughter, this beautiful stranger, who was somehow part of him, and felt something in his chest crack open. All the years of building wealth, chasing success, pursuing the next deal, the next property, the next achievement, none of it meant anything compared to this moment. Paige made a sound of disgust. "This is ridiculous. Fletcher, you can't seriously be falling for this obvious trap. She probably planned this whole thing, probably isn't even sick." "Mrs. Calloway." Dr. Reeves had appeared in the doorway, her voice professionally cold. "Cassidy Monroe collapsed from severe malnutrition and exhaustion. She's been working double shifts to support her daughter while putting herself through continuing education courses. There's nothing fake about her condition, and your implications are both insulting and absurd." "I want a paternity test," Paige demanded. "Fine," Fletcher said, not even looking at her. "We'll do a test, but I already know she's mine." "How can you possibly?" "Because I see myself in her. Because my mother's right. She's unmistakably a Calloway. And because," he stood up, still holding Arya's hand, "because 7 years ago I made the worst mistake of my life. I'm not compounding it by abandoning my daughter." Paige grabbed her designer handbag. "Fine, ruin your life over some woman who couldn't even tell you she was pregnant. But don't come crying to me when this blows up in your face." "I won't. We're done, Paige. We've been done for 2 years. This doesn't change anything between us." "It changes everything." Paige's composure finally cracked. "You've been withdrawn from our children for months, claiming you needed space to focus on work. But this is the real reason, isn't it? You've been pining after your ex-wife. I've been pining after the life I threw away. There's a difference." Paige left in a storm of expensive perfume and impotent fury. The moment the elevator doors closed behind her, the waiting room burst into spontaneous applause. An elderly patient in a wheelchair called out, "Son, if you don't marry that nurse again, you're stupider than you look." General laughter and agreement rippled through the crowd. Fletcher looked at his mother, who was smiling in a way he hadn't seen in years. "Mother," he started. "Don't mother me. I should have said all of this 5 years ago." Georgina's voice was soft but firm. "Cassidy was good for you, Fletcher. She made you happy in a way Paige never did. I was wrong to push you towards suitable women when the right woman was already in your life. You hated Cassidy. I didn't hate her. I was threatened by her." Georgina's admission shocked everyone in earshot. "She didn't need our money or our name. She loved you for you, and that scared me because it meant I couldn't control your relationship the way I'd controlled everything else in your life." Fletcher looked at his mother, really looked at her, and saw an old woman carrying decades of regret. "Help me fix this," he said quietly. "Help me be the father Arya deserves. The man Cassidy deserved 5 years ago." Georgina squeezed his shoulder. "That's all I've wanted, darling. For you to be happy. Truly happy." Arya tugged on Fletcher's hand. "Can I show you my drawings now? I drew pictures of Mommy being a superhero nurse while we waited. I would love to see your drawings, sweetheart." As Fletcher sat down with his daughter, looking at crayon drawings of a superhero, nurse saving the world, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 5 years. Hope. Real, genuine hope. But hope wasn't enough. Fletcher knew that. He'd spent 5 years building a fortune while missing out on what actually mattered. He'd made every wrong choice, pursued every empty achievement, convinced himself that success could fill the hole where love should have been. Now he had a chance to fix it. A chance to be the father Arya deserved. Maybe even a chance to prove to Cassidy that people could change, that mistakes didn't have to define your entire life. But first, he needed a plan. And Fletcher Calloway was very, very good at making plans. If you're still watching, if this story has grabbed you and won't let go, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what Fletcher does next isn't just shocking. It's the kind of grand gesture that will either prove he's truly changed or confirm that he's still the same man who breaks hearts and makes promises he can't keep. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Fletcher deserves a second chance? Or has he lost that right forever? Your answer might surprise you by the end of this story. 3 days after Cassidy collapsed, after the doctors had stabilized her and loaded her with iron supplements and lectured her extensively about self-care, Georgina insisted she and Arya come stay at her townhouse during Cassidy's recovery. "I'm fine," Cassidy had protested weakly from her hospital bed. "We can go home. To that apartment with no elevator where you'll have to climb 3 flights of stairs?" Georgina had countered. "To that neighborhood where you have no support system since your mother passed? Absolutely not. You're coming home with me, and I won't hear another word about it." Cassidy had been too exhausted to argue. Besides, Arya had already bonded with Georgina in a way that made Cassidy's heart ache. Her daughter had been starved for family, for the kind of unconditional love that came from people who shared your blood and your history. The townhouse in Pacific Heights was as elegant as Cassidy remembered, but it felt different now, warmer somehow. Georgina had prepared a guest suite for them with thoughtful touches. Fresh flowers on the nightstand, a selection of books on the shelf for Arya, soft robes in the bathroom. On their second night there, after Arya was asleep, Georgina knocked on Cassidy's door. "May I come in?" Cassidy nodded, and Georgina entered carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed one to Cassidy and sat in the chair by the window. "We need to talk about Fletcher." Cassidy's hands tightened on her teacup. "What about him?" "He's been calling me every hour, asking about you and Arya. He wants to see her again." Georgina paused. "He wants to see you. I'm not ready, I know, but Cassidy, he's not going away, and I don't think you want him to. Not really. You don't know what I want, don't I?" Georgina's voice was gentle. "You kept my phone number in your emergency contacts for 5 years. You could have deleted it. You could have put down any number of friends or colleagues, but you kept mine. Why?" Cassidy stared into her tea, unable to answer. "You kept it because some part of you always knew that Arya would need her family. Her whole family. Not just you, but her father and her grandmother and the entire complicated mess that comes with the Calloway name." "He hurt me," Cassidy whispered. "Georgina, he destroyed me. Do you have any idea what it felt like to be called defective? To be thrown away because my body wouldn't cooperate on his timeline? No, I don't know what that felt like. But I know what it feels like to push away someone who loved you because you were too afraid of that love. I know what it feels like to realize too late that you've made terrible mistakes. This isn't about you and your regrets, isn't it?" Georgina set down her teacup. "I destroyed your marriage, Cassidy. Not single-handedly, but I planted the seeds. Every time I mentioned a suitable young woman from a good family, every time I implied you weren't quite right for our circle, every time I made Fletcher feel like choosing you was choosing beneath himself. I did that, and I've regretted it every day since. Why? Because you were the only person who ever loved my son for who he was instead of what he could provide, and I couldn't see that until it was too late." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 5 years of mistakes hanging between them. Finally, Cassidy spoke. "What does he want from me?" "A chance, just a chance to prove he's changed." Georgina leaned forward. "I'm not saying you have to forgive him. I'm not even saying you have to like him. But Arya deserves to know her father, and Fletcher deserves the opportunity to be the man he should have been 5 years ago. And if he hurts her, if he disappoints her, then I'll disown him myself," Georgina said fiercely. "That child is my granddaughter, and I will protect her with everything I have. But Cassidy, I've watched Fletcher these past 3 days. I've seen something in him I haven't seen since before your divorce. Purpose, real purpose, not just ambition. Purpose isn't enough, no, but it's a start." The next day, Fletcher arrived at his mother's townhouse at exactly 2 in the afternoon. Georgina had arranged everything, giving him strict instructions and even stricter warnings about what would happen if he messed this up. Arya was in the library, a sunny room on the 2nd floor, filled with books and comfortable chairs. She was curled up on the window seat, reading a book about space that was definitely too advanced for a 7-year-old. but that she was somehow understanding anyway. Fletcher stood in the doorway, watching his daughter read, and felt his heart expand in his chest. "That's a big book," he said softly. Arya looked up, and her face lit up with a smile that was pure sunshine. "Daddy, you came back. I promised I would." "Mommy says grown-ups break promises sometimes." Fletcher entered the room and sat down in the chair across from her window seat. "Some grown-ups do. I did when I was married to your mom, but I'm trying very hard not to be that person anymore." Arya studied him with those two old eyes. "Why did you leave Mommy?" The question was direct, honest, deserving of an honest answer. "I made a mistake, a really big one. I thought I knew what I wanted in life, what would make me happy. And I was wrong. Did you not love Mommy? I did love her. I loved her very much. But I let other people convince me that love wasn't enough, that I needed other things more." "What things?" "Money, success, the approval of people who didn't actually care about me." "That's dumb," Arya said with 7-year-old bluntness. "You're right. It was very dumb. Do you still love Mommy?" Fletcher took a breath. The honest answer was complicated. The honest answer was that he'd never stopped loving Cassidy, even when he'd convinced himself he had. Even when he'd married Paige and built a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt hollow at its core. "Yes," he said simply, "I do." "Then why don't you tell her?" "Because your Mommy is very angry with me, and she has every right to be. So I need to prove to her that I've changed before she'll believe anything I say." "How do you prove that?" Fletcher smiled. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. Any ideas?" Arya tilted her head, considering. "Mommy works really hard. She's always tired. And our apartment is kind of small and the water heater breaks a lot. And she cries sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep because she worries about money." Each observation was a knife to Fletcher's heart. While he'd been building a fortune, the mother of his child had been struggling to keep the water heater working. What if I could fix those things? Would that help? Maybe. Arya's voice was thoughtful. "But Mommy doesn't like charity. She says we don't need anyone's help." "What if it wasn't charity? What if it was just your dad taking care of his family? Is that what we are? A family?" Fletcher looked at this beautiful, brilliant child and felt something shift in his chest. "We're working on it, sweetheart. If you'll let me." Arya slid off the window seat and approached him cautiously. She stood in front of his chair, studying his face like she was memorizing it. "Daddy." "Yes? You have to promise really, really hard that you won't leave again. Because if you leave, it will make Mommy cry more. And I don't like when Mommy cries." Fletcher felt tears prick his eyes. "I promise really, really hard, Arya. I'm not going anywhere ever again." "Okay, then you can be my daddy for real." She climbed into his lap, and Fletcher wrapped his arms around her, holding his daughter for only the second time in her life. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and graham crackers and hope. And Fletcher Calloway, millionaire real estate developer, self-made success, story, made a decision that would shock everyone who knew him. He was going to prove he'd changed. Not with words, but with actions. Not with promises, but with presence. He was going to show Cassidy and Arya that he was worthy of being part of their family. He just needed 72 hours, a small army of contractors, and the kind of dedication he'd only ever previously given to business deals. If you want to see what Fletcher did next, something so dramatic that it went viral and had an entire neighborhood gathering in the streets, stay with me. Because this is where the story gets really good. But first, we need to understand what Fletcher was planning. Not just the renovation itself, but what it represented. A man trying to rebuild more than just a house. Trying to rebuild trust, family, and a love he'd thrown away. Comment below if you think grand gestures actually work, or if Fletcher is about to make another huge mistake. Because what happened over that weekend would change everything. Fletcher spent the next 40 to 8 hours doing something he'd never done before. Planning something that had nothing to do with profit margins or return on investment. This wasn't about building wealth. This was about building a home. He sat in his downtown office at 3 in the morning, surrounded by blueprints and contractor estimates and photographs of a small bungalow in Fairview that he'd driven past 17 times in the last 2 days. Number 247 Maple Street, the house where his daughter had grown up without him. The house where Cassidy had built a life from nothing while he'd been collecting properties like trophies. The house was small, not run down exactly, but tired. The kind of tired that came from a single mother working double shifts and never quite having enough time or money to fix everything that needed fixing, yellow shutters that needed paint, a front porch with crumbling concrete steps, a yard that was more weeds than grass, but it was theirs, Cassidy and Aria's home, the place they'd built their life together. Fletcher was about to change all of that. His architect, a woman named Regina, who specialized in residential renovation, spread another set of plans across his desk. "Mr. Calloway, I have to be honest with you. What you're asking for isn't realistic. A complete home renovation, structural changes, additions, total kitchen and bathroom overhauls. That kind of work takes months, not days. I don't have months. I have 72 hours. That's impossible. I'm willing to pay whatever it takes. Triple overtime for the crews, bonuses for early completion, premium pricing for materials." Fletcher met her eyes. "Money is not an object. Time is." Regina studied him for a long moment. "This is about that nurse, isn't it? The one from the news. The secret daughter story." Fletcher shouldn't have been surprised that word had spread. His confrontation with Paige in the hospital waiting room had been witnessed by at least 30 people. In the age of smartphones, nothing stayed private. "Yes," he said simply, "it's about them. And you think renovating her house will fix what you broke? No, but it's a start." Fletcher pulled up photos on his tablet. "My daughter talks about how the water heater doesn't work reliably, how her bedroom doesn't have a window, how her mother works herself to exhaustion and still worries about money. I can't undo 5 years of absence, but I can make sure they never have to worry about those things again." Regina looked at the plans again, then at Fletcher's face. She seemed to see something there that made her decision. "All right, I'll make some calls. But Mr. Calloway, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. Not some quick cosmetic fix. Real work, quality materials, a home they'll love for years, not just something that looks good in photos. Exactly what I want." By Friday evening, Fletcher had assembled a team, 3 construction crews instead of 1. Electricians, plumbers, roofers, landscapers. He'd called in every favor he had, offered bonuses that made experienced contractors willing to work through the weekend. Georgina had kept Cassidy and Aria at the townhouse under the pretense that Cassidy needed more recovery time. Cassidy had protested, worried about missing work, anxious about being away from home. "I've spoken to your supervisor at Mercy, General," Georgina had said firmly. "You're on medical leave for the next week, paid leave, so don't even start with the money argument." "Georgina, I can't accept." "You can, and you will. Besides, Aria is enjoying the library and the garden. Let her have this time. Let yourself rest." What Georgina didn't mention was that Fletcher had personally called the hospital administrator, someone who owed the Calloway family several favors, and ensured that Cassidy's leave would be fully paid and wouldn't count against her benefits. Some things, Fletcher was learning, were more important than credit. Saturday morning, 6 a.m., Fletcher stood on the sidewalk outside 247 Maple Street as the sun rose over Fairview. The street was quiet, families still sleeping, the world peaceful and unaware of what was about to happen. The first truck arrived at 6:15, then another, and another. By 7 a.m., the entire street was a hive of activity. Contractors unloading equipment, architects consulting blueprints, landscapers marking out the yard. The noise was considerable. Hammers, power tools, voices calling out measurements and instructions. By 7:30, neighbors started emerging from their houses. Mrs. Chen from next door was the first to approach. She was a tiny woman in her 70s who'd lived on Maple Street for 40 years and knew everyone's business. "Excuse me, young man. What exactly is going on here?" Fletcher extended his hand. "Fletcher Calloway. I'm Cassidy's ex-husband and Aria's father." Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. "The ex-husband? The one who left her?" "The same." Fletcher had the grace to look ashamed. "I'm trying to make amends, starting with making sure Cassidy and Aria have a home worthy of them." Mrs. Chen looked at the swarm of contractors, the pile of building materials, the architectural plans. She crossed her arms. "Cassidy didn't ask for this. I know. That's why I'm doing it. She's a proud woman. She might not appreciate you swooping in like some kind of hero when you're the one who left her struggling in the first place." "You're absolutely right." Fletcher met her skeptical gaze. "I was the villain in Cassidy's story. I hurt her in ways I can't undo, but I can make sure she never has to cry over a broken water heater again. I can make sure my daughter has a bedroom with a window. I can use my money for something that actually matters instead of just accumulating more of it." Something in his tone must have convinced her because Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "That girl has worked herself to the bone for 7 years. Never complained, never asked for help. Always had a smile even when I knew she was exhausted. I know. She deserves better than she got from you. I know that too. That's why I'm here." Mrs. Chen studied him for another long moment, then nodded. "All right then, but if you hurt her again, if you disappoint that beautiful child, you'll answer to me. And I might be 73, but I'm mean when I need to be." Fletcher couldn't help but smile. "I believe you, Mrs. Chen." By 8 a.m., word had spread through the neighborhood. Families emerged with coffee and curiosity. Children rode their bikes in circles, watching the activity. Someone set up folding chairs on their lawn like they were watching a show. Mr. Patterson from across the street brought over a cooler of cold water for the work crews. Mrs. Williams from 3 houses down started making sandwiches, insisting that men doing hard labor needed proper fuel. By 9 a.m., it had become a full-blown neighborhood event. A block party centered around the most dramatic home renovation Fairview had ever seen. Fletcher worked alongside the contractors, not just supervising but actually helping. He'd grown up in wealth, but his father had believed in understanding every aspect of the business. Fletcher knew his way around a toolbox. He helped carry materials, held boards steady while they were measured, and got his expensive shoes dusty and his designer shirts sweaty. The neighbors watched in fascination as this millionaire CEO worked like a common laborer on his ex-wife's house. "What exactly are you doing to the place?" Mr. Patterson asked during a water break. Fletcher pulled out his tablet, showing the plans. Complete kitchen renovation with professional-grade appliances, adding a 3rd bedroom and 2nd bathroom, new floors throughout, built-in bookshelves in what will be Aria's room, fresh paint inside and out, new roof, energy-efficient windows, central air conditioning, landscape garden with a reading nook. Mr. Patterson whistled low. "That's not a renovation. That's a complete rebuild. My daughter deserves a window in her bedroom. My ex-wife deserves a kitchen where everything actually works." Fletcher's voice was quiet but intense. "They deserve a home, not just a place to sleep between shifts." By noon, the transformation was already visible. The old porch was gone, replaced by the framework of something larger. The roof was half stripped, new materials waiting to be installed. Windows had been removed, new ones ready to go in, and then the news vans arrived. Someone, probably one of the neighbors, had tipped off the local news about what was happening. A millionaire CEO renovating his ex-wife's house after discovering he had a secret daughter. It was too good a story to pass up. The reporter, a young woman with perfect hair and determined expression, thrust a microphone at Fletcher. "Mr. Calloway, I'm Stephanie Chen from Channel 7 News. Sources say you're renovating your ex-wife's home after discovering you have a 7-year-old daughter you never knew about. Can you comment?" Fletcher looked at the camera, at the neighbors watching, at Mrs. Chen, who was glaring at him like she was daring him to say something stupid. He thought about Cassidy, watching this later. Aria, seeing her father on television. The millions of people who would judge him based on 30 seconds of footage. He decided to tell the truth. "I'm renovating the home of the woman I should never have divorced and the daughter I should have known about from day one." Fletcher looked directly into the camera. "I made terrible mistakes. I threw away something real for something that looked good on paper. I hurt the best person I've ever known because I was too focused on building an empire to see what actually mattered. Are you trying to win your ex-wife back? I'm trying to be worthy of a second chance. Whether I get one is entirely up to her." Fletcher paused. "But my daughter deserves a father who shows up and puts her needs first. Cassidy deserves support, not struggle. So yes, I'm renovating their house. I'm also setting up a trust fund for Aria's education. I'm ensuring Cassidy never has to work double shifts out of financial necessity again. I'm doing everything I should have been doing for the past 7 years. Some people are calling this a publicity stunt. Some people are wrong. This isn't about publicity. This is about being a father and trying to make amends for being a terrible husband." The interview went viral within hours. By Saturday evening, the hashtag Millionaire renovation was trending on social media. People were divided. Some called it romantic. Others called it manipulative. Think pieces were written about wealth and privilege and grand gestures versus actual change. Fletcher didn't care. He was too busy hanging custom curtains in Aria's room. Curtains printed with constellations because his daughter loved space and he'd actually listened when she talked about it. The work continued through Saturday night. Industrial lights were set up so the crews could keep going. Neighbors brought dinner, coffee, moral support. It became something more than just a renovation. It became a community coming together to support one of their own. Mrs. Williams told stories about Cassidy helping her after her hip surgery. Mr. Patterson talked about how Aria always made sure to say hello to everyone, how she'd draw pictures for the elderly neighbors. Mrs. Chen got emotional remembering how Cassidy had worked a double shift and still showed up to help with the neighborhood food drive. These people loved Cassidy and Aria. Fletcher realized with shame that he'd missed 7 years of this. 7 years of community, connection, the kind of real relationships that his wealthy circles could never replicate. Sunday morning brought new challenges. The addition of a second bathroom required more extensive plumbing work than anticipated. The kitchen cabinets were delayed in delivery. A section of the foundation needed unexpected repair. But Fletcher had planned for complications. He made calls, pulled strings, threw money at problems until they were solved. By Sunday afternoon, the work was back on track. Regina found him in what would be Aria's new bedroom, personally installing the built-in bookshelves. "Mr. Calloway, you should see the kitchen. It's stunning." Fletcher followed her to the back of the house where the kitchen had been completely transformed. What had been a cramped space with outdated appliances was now open and bright. White cabinets with soft close drawers, granite countertops, a 6-burner professional stove, double oven, a kitchen island with bar stools where a mother and daughter could have breakfast together. "This is a kitchen for someone who actually cooks," Regina said. "Not for show, but for living. Cassidy loves to cook." Fletcher's voice was soft. "When we were married, she'd make these elaborate Sunday dinners. She said cooking was how she showed love. Well, she'll be able to show a lot of love in this kitchen." By Sunday evening, as the sun set over Fairview, the transformation was complete. Fletcher stood on the sidewalk where he'd stood 36 hours earlier, looking at what they'd accomplished. Number 247 Maple Street was no longer a tired little bungalow. It was a home. The yellow shutters remained, freshly painted and cheerful. But everything else was new. A wraparound porch with a swing, new siding and a new roof. Windows that gleamed. A landscaped yard with native plants and a stone pathway leading to a garden reading nook. Inside, hardwood floors replaced worn carpet. The living room had built-in bookshelves and a working fireplace. The kitchen was a dream. 2 bathrooms meant privacy and comfort. Aria's bedroom had a window, a loft bed with a reading nook underneath, constellation curtains, and enough bookshelves for a library. Cassidy's bedroom was a sanctuary, soft blues and grays, a real queen-sized bed, an ensuite bathroom with a soaking tub. Every choice had been made with love, not to impress, but to provide comfort, not for show, but for actual living. Fletcher walked through the finished house alone as the contractors packed up their equipment. He ran his hand along the kitchen counters, stood in Aria's room imagining her reading by her window, sat on the porch swing that he'd installed because Cassidy had mentioned once, 10 years ago, that her childhood home had a porch swing. He'd remembered. He'd listened. He'd tried to build not just a house, but a home that reflected who Cassidy and Aria actually were. Now came the hard part, telling Cassidy what he'd done. His phone rang. Cassidy's name on the screen. Fletcher's heart hammered as he answered. "Hello? What did you do?" Her voice was tight, emotional. Mrs. Chen had clearly sent pictures. "I made things right. Or I started to anyway. Fletcher, you can't just renovate someone's entire house without asking." "I can, actually. I did. It's done. This is too much. It's not enough." Fletcher walked out to the porch, looking at the street where neighbors were still gathered, celebrating this small miracle. "Cassidy, you've been killing yourself to provide for our daughter, working double shifts, skipping meals, sacrificing everything. Let me do this. Let me provide for you both the way I should have been doing all along. I don't want your guilt money. It's not guilt money. It's love money." The words hung in the air between them. Fletcher could hear Cassidy's breathing on the other end of the line. "I love you, Cassidy. I never stopped loving you. And I love the daughter we made together, even though I didn't know she existed. Let me show you both that I've changed, that I can be the man you deserved 5 years ago." Silence. Then, softly, "Aria wants to come home. I know. The house is ready whenever you are. Fletcher, she started, then stopped. I need to see it. I'll pick you both up tomorrow morning. After he hung up, Fletcher sat on the porch swing, watching the neighborhood slowly return to normal. Families heading inside for dinner, children being called in from play, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He'd built a home. Now he had to hope it was enough to start building a family. If you're wondering whether Cassidy was going to forgive him, whether this grand gesture would work or backfire spectacularly, you're not alone. Every person on that street was wondering the same thing. Every person watching the viral video wanted to know if love really could survive betrayal. Stay with me, because what happens when Cassidy sees what Fletcher built will either restore your faith in second chances or break your heart. And I promise you the answer is worth the wait. Monday morning arrived bright and clear. Georgina's driver pulled up to 247 Maple Street at exactly 10 a.m. Fletcher had asked the neighbors to give them privacy for this moment, and they'd reluctantly agreed, though he could see curtains twitching in every window on the block. Cassidy got out of the car slowly, her hand gripping the door frame. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater. Her hair was down around her shoulders. She looked younger somehow, more like the girl he'd married than the exhausted woman he'd seen in the hospital bed. Arya tumbled out behind her, excitement making her bounce on her toes. "Mommy, look. Our house looks different." Cassidy stared at her home, her little yellow bungalow that had always been slightly shabby but entirely theirs. Except it wasn't shabby anymore. The transformation was so complete that for a moment she seemed unable to process it. Her hand came up to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. Fletcher stood on the new porch, hands in his pockets, watching her reaction with his heart in his throat. "You remembered," she whispered, looking at the porch swing. "You mentioned once that your childhood home had a porch swing, that you'd always wanted one of your own. That was 10 years ago." I remembered. Arya was already running up the new steps, her excitement overcoming any hesitation. "Daddy, can we see inside?" Fletcher looked at Cassidy, asking permission. She nodded slowly, still seemingly in shock. The inside was even more overwhelming than the outside. Cassidy walked through her home like she was seeing it for the first time. Her hands trailed along the built-in bookshelves. She stood in the kitchen doorway, staring at the professional-grade stove, the granite countertops, the kitchen island. "A 6-burner stove," she said quietly. "I used to dream about having a 6-burner stove." "I know. You told me once that you wanted to be able to cook a full Sunday dinner without juggling pans. You remembered that too." "I remembered everything, Cassidy. I just forgot what mattered." Arya's shriek of joy echoed from down the hallway. "Mommy, Mommy, come see my room." They found Arya spinning in circles in her new bedroom. She'd already discovered the loft bed, the reading nook, the window seat. "There's a window," Arya breathed. "Mommy, I have a window. And look at the curtains. They have constellations." Cassidy turned to Fletcher, tears streaming down her face now. "How did you know she loved space?" I listened. "When we talked at the hospital, she told me about wanting to learn about planets and stars." Fletcher moved to the window. "There's a telescope platform in the backyard too. Nothing fancy, but enough for her to start learning." Cassidy covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Fletcher wanted to reach for her but didn't dare. "And look, Mommy." Arya was pulling her to the bookshelves. "I can fit all my books and there's still room for more. There's a second bathroom too," Fletcher said quietly, "so you don't have to share with Arya during morning routines. And your room." He led them down the hallway to Cassidy's bedroom. She stood in the doorway, staring at the sanctuary he'd created. The soft colors, the comfortable bed, the ensuite bathroom. "A soaking tub," she whispered. "I haven't had a bath in 7 years. Just quick showers between shifts. Now you can have as many baths as you want." Cassidy walked into the bathroom, ran her hand along the edge of the tub, then turned back to him. "Fletcher, this is too much. It's not enough." He stayed in the doorway, respecting her space. "Cassidy, you've given me the greatest gift in the world, our daughter. You've raised her alone, sacrificed everything, never asked me for a dime. Let me do this, please." "Why?" "Because the first love you. Because I was an idiot who threw away the best thing in my life for something shiny and meaningless. Because I want to prove that I've changed, that I'm not the man who hurt you." He stepped closer. "Because every day for the past 5 years, I've regretted walking away from you. And now that I've found you again, found out we have this incredible daughter, I'm not letting you go without a fight." Cassidy stared at this man, her ex-husband, the father of her child, the person who had broken her heart so completely she'd thought it would never heal. "I can't just forgive you because you renovated my house. I know. And I can't just forget what you did to me, how you made me feel. I know that too. Arya deserves a father. I won't keep you from her. But that doesn't mean she gestured between them. That doesn't mean this can ever be fixed. I'm not asking for us. Not yet." Fletcher held her gaze. "I'm asking for a chance to prove I've changed. Let me be Arya's father. Let me be your friend. Let me show you over time that I'm not the man who called you unsuitable and threw away our marriage. And if I never forgive you, if I never want more than CO parenting." Pain flashed across his face, but he nodded. "Then I'll accept that. Having Arya in my life, being able to support you both, that's more than I deserve. I won't push for more than you're willing to give." From down the hallway, Arya called out, "Mommy, there's a fairy reading corner in the garden." Cassidy looked at Fletcher, really looked at him, saw the sincerity in his eyes, the hope, the fear, saw a man who had spent 72 hours and a small fortune trying to build a home for people he loved. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay? Okay, you can try. Try to be Arya's father. Try to prove you've changed. Try to earn back what you threw away." She met his eyes. "But Fletcher, if you hurt her, if you disappoint our daughter or make her feel like she's not enough, I will make sure you never see her again. Do you understand?" "I understand. I won't let you down. Either of you. I promise." Arya appeared in the doorway. "Mommy, can Daddy stay for lunch? I want to show him my telescope and my books and everything." Cassidy looked at her daughter's hopeful face, at Fletcher's nervous expression, and made a decision. "Yes, sweetheart. Daddy can stay for lunch." The smile that broke across Fletcher's face was like sunrise, pure, genuine joy. As Arya dragged Fletcher outside to show him the garden, Cassidy stood alone in her new bedroom, looking around at this space that had been created with such care and attention. Every detail was perfect because Fletcher had actually listened to who she was, what she needed, what mattered. It didn't erase the past. It didn't undo the hurt or the betrayal or the 5 years of struggle. But it was a start, and maybe, Cassidy thought, starting was enough for now. If you believe in the power of actions over words, of showing up instead of just promising, hit that subscribe button. Because this story isn't just about a house renovation. It's about the harder work of renovating a heart, rebuilding trust, and proving that change is possible. Comment below and tell me, would you give Fletcher a second chance? Or is some betrayal too deep to forgive? Your answer might change as you see what happens next. Because rebuilding a house took 72 hours. Rebuilding a family would take much longer. 6 months passed like pages turning in a book. Each day a new chapter in the story of a family learning to be a family. Fletcher showed up. That was the simplest way to describe it. He just kept showing up. Weekly dinners that became twice weekly. School events where he sat in the audience, often the only father, there wearing a business suit because he'd come straight from work. Father-daughter breakfast dates every Saturday morning at the diner on the corner, where Arya would order chocolate chip pancakes and tell him about her week. He helped with homework, sitting at the kitchen island he'd installed, patiently explaining math concepts and listening to Arya read aloud. He attended parent-teacher conferences, doctor appointments, even the school book fair where Arya dragged him from table to table, collecting stories faster than he could pay for them. And slowly, carefully, Fletcher also became part of Cassidy's life in a way that wasn't about romance or their past. He became her friend. He'd show up with coffee on mornings when she'd worked night shifts. He'd watch Arya when Cassidy had continuing education courses. He'd fix things around the house without being asked, just noticing what needed attention and quietly handling it. He never pushed for more, never presumed, always respectful of boundaries, always asking permission, always putting Arya's needs first. The neighborhood watched this transformation with the invested interest of people who'd witnessed the dramatic beginning. Mrs. Chen reported to anyone who would listen that Fletcher Calloway was proving himself to be a decent man after all. He's there every Saturday morning, she'd say. And he doesn't just show up. He's present. Listens to that child like she's the most important person in the world. But Fletcher's life wasn't simple. He had 3 other children from his marriage to Paige. Mackenzie, 10. Trevor, 8. Sadie, 6. Children who'd grown up with weekend visitation and a father who was often distracted by work. Introducing his children to each other had been terrifying. Fletcher had put it off for weeks, worried about how his other children would react to discovering they had a half-sister their father had never mentioned. The meeting happened at a park, neutral ground, with both Cassidy and Paige present. Awkward didn't begin to describe it. Mackenzie had been hostile from the start. So, you're the secret kid. Arya had looked up at this older girl with those gray Callaway eyes and responded with perfect 7-year-old honesty. I'm not a secret. I'm just new to you, which had made Mackenzie blink in surprise. Trevor, always practical, had asked, do you like science? Because I'm building a volcano for the science fair, and I need someone to help me paint it. I love science, Arya had said, and I'm really good at painting. Sadie, the youngest, had simply walked up to Arya and taken her hand. Want to see my stuffed animal collection? I have 47. By the end of that first afternoon, the children were playing together like they'd known each other forever. It was the adults who struggled. Paige had pulled Fletcher aside. This is what you left me for? A struggling nurse and her kid? I didn't leave you for anyone, Paige. We divorced because we were making each other miserable. Fletcher kept his voice low. And that's my daughter you're talking about. Show some respect. I can't believe you're playing happy families with the woman who kept your child from you. She had her reasons. Good ones. Because I was exactly the kind of man who would hurt her again. Fletcher met his ex-wife's eyes. I'm trying to be better, for all my children, including the 3 I share with you. Over the following months, Fletcher made a conscious effort to be more present for all his children. He rearranged his work schedule to actually make it to Trevor's science fair, where the volcano, painted beautifully by Arya, won second place. He attended Mackenzie's soccer games, even the ones that conflicted with board meetings. He made time for Sadie's elaborate tea parties where he was forced to drink imaginary tea and compliment her stuffed animals. And slowly, Mackenzie's hostility faded. She started asking about Arya during their weekends together. Started requesting that Arya be included in activities. She's actually pretty cool, Mackenzie had admitted grudgingly. And she helped me with my art project. Arya had her father's charm and her mother's kindness. She won people over simply by being herself. Open, curious, kind to everyone. Watching his children together, Fletcher realized what he'd been missing for years. He thought success meant building wealth, closing deals, expanding his empire. But this, his children laughing together, forming bonds that would last their lifetimes, this was actual success. Cassidy watched all of this from a careful distance. She saw how Fletcher showed up for Arya, never missing a commitment, never breaking a promise. She saw how he'd changed his entire approach to fatherhood for all his children, not just the newly discovered one. She also saw the moments when it was hard for him, when business opportunities had to be declined because they conflicted with school events, when he was exhausted from working late but still showed up for Saturday breakfast because he'd promised Arya, when he sat through children's concerts and recitals with genuine interest instead of checking his phone. He's really trying, Yolanda observed one evening when she'd come over for dinner. She'd become a regular presence, the protective best friend who was determined to make sure Fletcher earned every inch of trust he was asking for. I know. Are you going to let him back in? Not just as Arya's father, but as your, Yolanda paused, whatever you two might become. Cassidy looked out the window where Fletcher was pushing Arya on the new swing set he'd installed last month. The sound of her daughter's laughter filled the evening air. I don't know. He's different. I see that. But I'm different too. I'm not the girl who fell in love with him 10 years ago. I'm not even the woman he divorced. I'm someone else now. Someone who's been broken and rebuilt herself. I don't know if the person I am now can fit with the person he's becoming. Maybe that's the point, Yolanda said softly. You're not trying to recreate what you had. You're building something new, maybe. But Cassidy was afraid of being hurt again, afraid of letting Fletcher close enough to destroy her a second time, afraid of wanting something she might not be able to have. So she kept her distance, kept him in the friend zone, kept her heart carefully protected, until the night everything changed. It was a random Wednesday in November. Cassidy had worked a double shift, and Fletcher had picked up Arya from school, helped her with homework, and made dinner. When Cassidy came home, exhausted and emotionally drained from losing a patient, she found Fletcher in her kitchen. He'd made soup, real soup, from scratch, the kind her mother used to make when Cassidy was sick. The house smelled like comfort and care. You look terrible, he said gently. Go take a bath. I've got Arya. I can't just, Cassidy started. Cassidy, you're dead on your feet. I've got our daughter. She's already in her pajamas, teeth brushed, reading in bed. Go take care of yourself for once. Too tired to argue, Cassidy went to her bathroom and filled the soaking tub Fletcher had installed. She sank into the hot water and let herself cry for the patient she'd lost, for the exhaustion that was bone deep, for the loneliness of always being strong. When she emerged 45 minutes later in her pajamas, she found Fletcher reading to Arya in her bedroom. Her daughter was already half asleep, tucked into her loft bed with her stuffed elephant. And then they lived happily ever after. Fletcher finished the story softly. He kissed Arya's forehead. Good night, sweetheart. Night, Daddy. Love you. Love you too, baby. Cassidy stood in the doorway, watching this scene, feeling something crack in her chest. This was what she'd dreamed of when she was pregnant and alone. A father reading to their daughter. A family saying goodnight with love and security. Fletcher noticed her and quietly closed Arya's door. He found her in the kitchen, staring at the pot of soup he'd made. Rough day. I lost a patient. 23 years old. Motorcycle accident. We tried everything. She shook her head. His mother looked just like mine used to. That same expression of disbelief when I had to tell her he didn't make it. Fletcher moved closer, not touching but offering presence. I'm sorry. And I come home to find you've made soup and put my daughter to bed and her voice cracked, and you're just here, being everything I needed and couldn't ask for. Cassidy, he said softly. Why couldn't you have been this person 5 years ago? Why did it take losing me to make you into the man I needed? I don't know. Fletcher's honesty was painful. I was ambitious, selfish, too concerned with what people thought, and not concerned enough with what actually mattered. I let my mother's opinions and society's expectations matter more than your heart. I was weak, and you paid the price for my weakness. I can't go through that again. I can't let you in just to have you decide I'm not enough again. You were always enough. More than enough. Fletcher took a careful step closer. I was the one who wasn't enough. I didn't deserve you then. I'm not sure I deserve you now. But I'm trying, Cassidy. Every single day, I'm trying to be worthy of you and Arya. Cassidy looked at him, this man who'd broken her and was now carefully trying to put the pieces back together. Not as they were, but as something new. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. What if we try and it doesn't work? What if we hurt each other again? Then we'll hurt. But at least we tried. Fletcher reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. I love you, Cassidy Monroe. I never stopped loving you, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me again if you give me the chance. Cassidy felt tears on her face. I don't know if I can. That's okay. I'll wait, however long it takes. And that's when Cassidy realized something important. Fletcher wasn't asking her to trust him immediately. He wasn't demanding forgiveness or pushing for a resolution. He was simply showing up day after day, proving through actions that he'd changed. Maybe trust wasn't something you decided to give. Maybe it was something you grew, slowly, through 1,000 small moments of someone proving they deserved it. She squeezed his hand. Stay for soup? I'd love to. They sat at the kitchen island, eating soup and talking about everything and nothing. Their conversation ranged from Arya's upcoming school play to Fletcher's latest business. Challenge to Cassidy's dream of one day teaching nursing instead of just practicing it. It was comfortable, easy, the kind of companionship Cassidy had never had with Fletcher during their marriage, because they'd been too young, too uncertain, too influenced by outside voices. This was different. Two adults who'd been broken and were learning how to be whole again. When Fletcher left that night, he paused at the door. Thank you for letting me be here. Not just for Arya, but for you too. Thank you for making soup. Anytime you need soup, I'm your guy. He smiled, that genuine smile that reached his eyes. Good night, Cassidy. Good night, Fletcher. After he left, Cassidy stood in her kitchen, the one he'd renovated with such care, and let herself imagine. Just for a moment, what if they could make this work? What if the family Arya deserved was actually possible? It was a dangerous thought, but it was also a hopeful one. And hope, Cassidy was learning, was worth the risk. December arrived with cold winds and the promise of snow. The Fairview Elementary School winter concert was approaching, and Arya had been practicing her solo for weeks. She'd been chosen to sing a verse in the choir's performance of seasonal songs. It wasn't a big role, just a few lines, but to Arya it was everything. "You have to come," she told Fletcher during their Saturday breakfast. "You and Mommy both. And Grandma Georgina, if she wants. And maybe Mackenzie and Trevor and Sadie?" Fletcher smiled at his daughter's growing confidence in claiming her place in their blended family. "I'll talk to everyone, but I'll definitely be there, sweetheart." Front row. The night of the concert, Fletcher arrived at the elementary school 45 minutes early to secure the best seats. Georgina accompanied him, elegant in a wool coat and pearls, looking around the elementary school cafeteria. Turned auditorium with the same curiosity an anthropologist might show studying a foreign culture. "This is charming," she said, and actually meant it. "Look at all the handmade decorations. Arya's class made those snowflakes," Fletcher said, pointing to the paper decorations hanging from the ceiling. She told me which ones were hers. Mackenzie, Trevor, and Sadie arrived with Paige, who had agreed to a temporary truce for the sake of the children. The siblings immediately started arguing about who got to sit where, eventually arranging themselves in a row with Sadie on Fletcher's lap. Cassidy arrived 15 minutes before the concert started, still in her scrubs from the hospital. "I'm sorry. Emergency case ran late." "You made it. That's what matters." Fletcher gestured to the seat he'd saved beside him. Cassidy slid in next to him, and for a moment they were just two parents at their daughter's school concert, part of a crowd of families, ordinary and unremarkable, and exactly what Cassidy had dreamed of. The lights dimmed. The children filed onto the risers at the front of the cafeteria. Arya spotted them immediately, and her face lit up with a smile that could power the city. She waved, breaking choir protocol. Fletcher waved back, not caring who saw. The concert was a typical elementary school production. Some children singing enthusiastically off-key, some forgetting the words. One kid picking his nose throughout the entire performance. But when Arya stepped forward for her solo verse, her clear voice filling the cafeteria, Fletcher felt his eyes burning with tears. "That's our girl," he whispered to Cassidy. "Our girl," she agreed softly. After the concert, they gathered in the parking lot, a blended family that shouldn't work but somehow did. Georgina with her arm around Arya, telling her she sang like an angel. The siblings congratulating her with the casual affection of kids who'd grown to genuinely like each other. Paige even offered a polite compliment before loading her children into her car. A woman from the PTA approached, recognition dawning on her face. "You're the couple from the viral video, the Millionaire renovation." Cassidy blushed. "That was 6 months ago." "But are you back together?" "Everyone wants to know." Fletcher and Cassidy exchanged glances. They'd been asked this question countless times by neighbors, by colleagues, by strangers on the internet who'd followed their story. "We're taking things slow," Cassidy said diplomatically. "Very slow," Fletcher added with a smile. "Giving Cassidy time to decide if I'm worth a second chance." "And?" the PTA mom pressed. "Are you?" Cassidy looked at Fletcher. This man who'd broken her heart and then spent 6 months trying to heal it, who'd built her a home not to buy her love, but to show he valued her, who'd embraced fatherhood with a dedication that sometimes brought her to tears, who'd been patient, consistent, genuinely changed. "Ask me again in 6 months," Cassidy said softly, but she was smiling. Fletcher's answering smile was bright enough to light the parking lot. That night, after Arya was asleep in her Constellation bedroom, Fletcher prepared to leave for his downtown apartment. He'd never presumed he could stay, always respected Cassidy's space completely. But at the door, Cassidy stopped him. "Fletcher?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For tonight. For being there. For being the father she deserves. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." "I know. And that's what's different." Cassidy moved closer. 5 years ago, there were always 100 places you'd rather be. Business meetings, social obligations, impressing the right people. But now the only place I want to be is wherever you and Arya are. Cassidy looked up at him, and Fletcher saw something in her eyes that made his heart race. Something soft, vulnerable, hopeful. "Fletcher, I think," she started. But whatever she was going to say was interrupted by her phone ringing. The hospital. She was on call. "I have to go," she said apologetically. "Cardiac emergency. I'll stay with Arya." "You don't have to." "I want to." Fletcher pulled out his phone. "I'll cancel my morning meeting. Just go save someone's life. I've got our daughter." Our daughter. The words still made something warm bloom in Cassidy's chest. She left for the hospital, and Fletcher settled onto her couch with a book and the baby monitor, ready to be there if Arya woke up. This was what changed meant. Not grand gestures, though those had their place, but the quiet showing up, the canceled meeting, the choice to put family first without being asked. Cassidy worked through the night, saving a life, losing another, existing, in that space between hope and heartbreak that defined her profession. She came home at dawn to find Fletcher asleep on her couch, the baby monitor on the coffee table beside him. Arya was still sleeping peacefully. Everything was fine. He'd just stayed because he'd promised. Cassidy stood looking at him for a long moment. This man who'd hurt her so badly was now the one making her feel safe. This man who'd called her inadequate was now showing her daily that she was more than enough. Maybe, she thought, forgiveness wasn't a single decision. Maybe it was 1,000 small choices to see someone's growth instead of their failures. Fletcher stirred, opened his eyes, saw her watching him. Everything okay? Everything's fine. Patient made it through surgery. Good. He sat up, rubbing his face. I should go. Let you rest. Fletcher, Cassidy said quietly. Stay. What? Stay for breakfast. Stay for the morning. Just stay. Something shifted in Fletcher's expression. Hope, raw and beautiful. Are you sure? No. But I'm tired of being sure about everything. I'm tired of protecting myself so carefully that I never let anyone close. Cassidy moved to sit beside him on the couch. You've spent 6 months proving you've changed. I see it. I believe it. And I think maybe it's time I stop punishing you for who you used to be and start seeing who you've become. Fletcher took her hand carefully, like it was something precious and fragile. I won't hurt you again. I swear, Cassidy. You can't promise that. We might hurt each other. That's what happens when you let someone close. But I think, she paused, I think the possibility of us is worth the risk of pain. So what does this mean? It means we try. Slowly, carefully, with Arya's needs first always. But we try. Fletcher pulled her close, and Cassidy let herself lean into him, let herself accept comfort and care from someone who'd once been her greatest source of pain. I love you, he whispered into her hair. I never stopped loving you. I love you too. Even when I hated you, I loved you. They stayed like that as the sun rose over Fairview, two people who'd been broken finding their way back to whole. When Arya woke up an hour later and found both her parents in the kitchen making pancakes together, her shriek of joy could be heard 3 houses down. Daddy's here for breakfast? On a not Saturday. I'm here for breakfast, Fletcher confirmed. Are you going to stay forever? Fletcher looked at Cassidy, who nodded slightly. I'm going to try, sweetheart. Good, Arya said with the satisfied confidence of a child who'd been hoping for exactly this. Because families should be together, out of the mouths of children. The following months weren't perfect. There were arguments about parenting styles and disagreements about money and moments when old hurts resurfaced. But they worked through it. With honesty, with patience, with the kind of commitment that came from choosing each other daily. Fletcher officially moved into the house he'd renovated, not as a guest but as a partner. The neighborhood celebrated with a block party. Mrs. Chen cried happy tears. The kids who'd watched the dramatic renovation 6 months earlier now watched the family come together. Georgina became a regular presence, the grandmother she'd never had. The chance to be, making up for lost time with fierce dedication. Fletcher's relationship with his other children deepened too. Weekend visitations became genuine time together, not just obligatory custody arrangements. Mackenzie, Trevor, and Sadie gained not just a half-sister, but an extended family that actually functioned. Paige eventually moved on, finding someone who suited her better than Fletcher ever had. The bitterness faded to indifference, which was its own kind of healing. And Arya thrived in a home filled with love, laughter, and the security of parents who chose each other and their family every single day. 1 year after that fateful phone call, Cassidy and Fletcher stood in their backyard, watching Arya use her telescope while her siblings argued about constellations. We did it, Fletcher said quietly. We actually did it. We're doing it, Cassidy corrected. Present tense. Every day, we're choosing this. Best choice I ever made. Second best, Cassidy said with a smile. The best was when I decided to give you a second chance. Fletcher pulled her close. Thank you for that. Thank you for being brave enough to try again. Thank you for being worth the risk. Inside, the phone rang. Georgina calling to confirm dinner plans. The kids were arguing about whether Pluto was still a planet. The house that had been renovated with love was now filled with life. This was success, not wealth or status or empire building. Just this. Family, love, second chances that worked because two people committed to being better than they'd been. Sometimes, the best things in life come from the worst mistakes. Sometimes, the call that ruins everything is actually the call that saves everything. Sometimes, 7-year-old girls are braver than adults and make the choices that change the world. And sometimes, just sometimes, people really do change. Not because they want to prove something, but because they finally understand what actually matters. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in second chances and the power of showing up, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs hope. Subscribe to Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips for more stories that will make you believe in love again. Comment below and tell me your story. Have you ever given someone a second chance? Have you ever been the one asking for forgiveness? What happened? I read every comment, and your stories matter. Here's what I want you to take from Cassidy and Fletcher's story. Love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every single day. It's showing up when it's inconvenient. It's listening when you'd rather talk. It's putting someone else's needs before your own ego. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward despite the pain. It means seeing growth instead of only seeing failures. It means being brave enough to risk being hurt again because the possibility of love is worth it. Change is possible, but it requires action, not just words. Fletcher didn't win Cassidy back with apologies. He won her back by becoming someone worthy of being won back, by proving day after day that he'd learned from his mistakes. Children are resilient, but they deserve stability. Arya thrived because the adults in her life put her needs first. Not their egos, not their pride, but her need for family and security. Sometimes, the worst moments of our lives lead to the best outcomes. Cassidy's collapse brought a secret to light that reunited a family. Fletcher's divorce from Paige freed him to become who he was meant to be. Arya's phone call set everything in motion. Never underestimate the power of one brave choice. That little girl calling her grandmother changed 3 lives. Your brave choice, whatever it is, might change everything too. Money can't buy love, but it can be used to show love. Fletcher's renovation wasn't about buying forgiveness. It was about using his resources to make life easier for people he loved. There's a difference. Community matters. The neighbors of Fairview rallied around Cassidy and Arya. They celebrated Fletcher's redemption. They invested in this family's success. We all need people who believe in us. It's never too late to become who you should have been. Fletcher was 41 when he met his daughter. Georgina was 72 when she realized her mistakes. Age doesn't limit growth. The best inheritance you can give your children isn't money. It's the example of adults who choose love, who work through conflict, who show up consistently. Arya will remember that her father came back, that her parents chose each other. That family is built through daily choices. So here's my challenge to you. If there's someone in your life you need to forgive, consider it. Not because they deserve it, but because holding on to pain hurts you more than them. If there's someone you've hurt, show them you've changed. Not with words, but with consistent action over time. Be patient. Earn back what you lost. If you're struggling alone, let people help. Cassidy's pride almost kept her from the family she deserved. Ask for help. Accept support. You don't have to carry everything alone. If you're a parent, show up. Every school concert, every homework session, every bedtime story matters. You're building humans, not resumes. And if you've been hurt, know this. You get to decide how your story ends. Cassidy could have kept Fletcher at a distance forever. She chose to try again. You can too, if the person has truly proven they've changed. Or you can choose to move forward without them. Both are valid. Both take courage. Trust yourself to know the difference. Fletcher and Cassidy's story teaches us that redemption is real, that people can change, that families come in all forms, and sometimes the ones we build are stronger than the ones we're born into, that a 7-year-old's phone call can change everything, that grand gestures mean nothing without daily follow-through, that love, real love, is both the hardest and most worthwhile thing we'll ever do. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Thank you for believing in second chances and messy families and people who choose to grow. Remember, you are worthy of a love that shows up. You are capable of change if you commit to it. You are never too broken to build something beautiful. Until next time, this is Dr. Phillips reminding you that every ending is really just a new beginning. Every collapse can lead to a rebuilding. Every mistake is an opportunity to become better. Choose love. Choose growth. Choose to believe that the best is yet to come, because sometimes it really is. Now go make that brave choice you've been thinking about. Call that person. Forgive that mistake. Take that risk. Your story is waiting to be written. Make it a good one.